The New York Islanders prospect pool was ranked dead last in the NHL a year ago. Well, they've moved up, but how much? And we'll break down some of the top players on their prospect list and see when they're due to be in the NHL. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We've got a lot to discuss today, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You can also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR vs NYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long. During the offseason, that's hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, the draft. If it's happening to the New York Islanders, we'll cover it here on the Locked On Islanders podcast. And it's always great to talk a little Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. So every year in the summer, the Athletic comes out with its prospect ratings, and it basically votes on the prospect pool of all 32 NHL teams. A year ago, the Islanders were dead last in the NHL in the Athletics rankings. If you recall, everydayers may recall, Hadi Kalakesh of Locked On NHL Prospects joined us a year ago and basically described the Islanders prospect pool as more of a puddle. Well, earlier you heard Hadi basically say that this team has improved its prospect pool, that it was now more of a pond than a puddle. Well, let's see what the Athletic had to say. And they're rolling out their rankings over 4 days, doing 8 teams per day. So in 4 days, they will cover all 32 teams. And the Islanders are still in the bottom quarter of the league, but they are ranked 25th now. So that is obviously a 7-step improvement over last year. It's interesting, though. And before we get into the specific players on this ranking and what was said about them, here is the interesting thing. We mentioned that there are 7 teams ranked below the New York Islanders. And those of you who have heard me talk about the Islanders being stuck in the muddy middle, everydayers, you know we've talked about this several times over the course of the offseason. Not good enough to be Stanley Cup contenders, but not bad enough to really get some top prospects in the draft, or at least to get a shot at a generational talent in the draft. The 7 teams below the Islanders, 6 of them have something in common, and that is they are all elite teams or have been elite teams in recent years. The one exception, depending on how you define recent years, is the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are ranked right behind the Islanders at 26th in this poll. But going down from there, the Vegas Golden Knights at 27. They just won a cup a couple of years back, made it to the cup final the year before that. The Vancouver Canucks, who, again, one of the better teams during the regular season last year in the National Hockey League. The Boston Bruins, been an elite team for years, not last year, but the year before, set a record for points in a season in the NHL. The Edmonton Oilers, who were just in the Stanley Cup final this past year. The Colorado Avalanche, who won a cup a few years back and have been one of the NHL's best teams over the last 5 to 7 years. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning, winners of 2 cups, team that went to 3 cup finals. Yes, they are starting perhaps to be on the downside of their, curve, and their window for cup contention is probably closing. Just got rid of Steven Stamkos, or, lost him in free agency. But out of those 7 teams who are lower than the Islanders on the prospect list, 6 of them have been elite, and the other one were elite a couple of years back and are basically the Penguins struggling to try to give guys like Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang one more shot at a cup. And yeah, they've won multiple Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh with that core. So the Islanders are sort of different than the teams behind them in that they did not enjoy regular season success that would make them an elite team. Yeah, they had the 2 runs to the conference final, but again, in both of those years, the Islanders barely made the playoffs. And again, when it comes to prospect pools, it is a roller coaster ride. You go up the rankings, you go down the rankings. You build up to having a contending team. Then you start trading away picks and prospects to get the last piece of the puzzle at the trade deadline, or 2 pieces of the puzzle. And to get a guy who could help you now because you think we're one of the best 5 or 6 teams in the league. We're all in. We're going to win. And then your team falls off. You start accumulating picks and prospects, and then you go back up the rankings. The Islanders didn't do that. They didn't have that elite run. So that is sort of the issue. Now, keep in mind, for the Athletics rankings, and just so people don't ask questions, essentially the players have to be, ranked. They have to be 22 years or younger as of September 15th of this year. So we're talking mostly about players who were drafted between 2020 and 2024. Guys who are no longer on this list because they've aged out: Simon Holmstrom, Samuel Bolduc. They are not considered in this rank. And they had a year ago exactly, the Islanders were ranked 30th in this ranking, then fell down to 32. And their draft grade, according to The Athletic and Corey Pronman, who did these rankings, was a B. So that is, sort of where things stand. And we're going to discuss some of the players on this list and what The Athletic had to say about them, how many of them are really kind of NHL ready, what their rankings and ceiling is going to be. We've got all of that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Oh, yeah. We'll also talk about some comments by former Rangers and briefly Islanders GM Neil Smith and what he had to say. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, a Hall of Fame player who was with the Islanders in the early to mid-90s. I think this is an easy one, but let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And, they still have the all-in pricing. And my favorite aspect of the Game Time app, the view from your seat. You log on to the app, you get a panoramic view of what you'll see from your seat before you purchase the tickets, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. So create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So who were the top prospects in the Islanders system that helped them move up the ranks a little bit? You got to start with Cole Eiserman. He is obviously number one. And the thing about Eiserman that gets him to the top of these rankings, you know, for the top prospects, they rank skating, puck skills, hockey sense, compete level, and shot. So you have 5 categories. For Cole Eiserman, the first 4 categories were ranked as NHL average by the scouts at The Athletic, but his shot was ranked as high end. And, you know, here's a little quote from the ranking or from the explanation of the ranking of Eiserman. He isn't the best playmaker in the world, but he has game-breaking qualities with his one-on-one play and shot when the puck is on his stick. He can beat goalies often with his one-timer and his wrist shot from range. He sees the ice well enough and can make tough passes, although he absolutely prefers to shoot and tends to overshoot the puck. Overall projection for Cole Eiserman is as a legitimate top 6 wing in the NHL. And that is very, very important because the Islanders have not had a player who meets that description in their farm system or in their prospect pool for a very long time. Now, there was a surprise in the second player on the Athletics list, and that was Marcus Gidloff, who the Islanders drafted this year with the 147th overall pick. And they think he can develop into a starting goalie in the NHL if he can clean up a couple of his little problems. Now, he's 6'6", and he's quick moving from, laterally in his crease, although he isn't considered explosive moving side to side. He tracks the puck well, stays square to the puck, and, basically needs to clean up not scrambling so much in front of his net. If he can clean up some of those details, they feel he can be a starting goalie in the NHL. I think this may be overrating Gidloff at this point. I think the potential is there, but boy, it's going to take a while for that to happen. Now, to tell you about the rankings here, the third player ranked for the Islanders is last year's top pick in the second round, Danny Nelson. And Nelson is, probably being ranked as a future third-line player in the NHL. And again, that tells you why the Islanders are ranked 25th in the league. You're talking about the third player in their prospect pool being a bottom 6 forward in his projection. His skating, puck skills, and compete level are average. Hockey sense is the issue for Danny Nelson, according to The Athletic. He plays hard. He is responsible without the puck. He kills penalties well, but he has good skills, but I wouldn't call him an offensive dynamo. He shows flashes one-on-one or with his shot, but it isn't consistent. And, again, they're thinking he could be a third-line center. Then fourth on the list is Jesse Pulkkinen, the 6'6" defenseman, who I think scouts are kind of divided on. Second round pick by the Islanders, projected to play NHL games, ranking him as a third pair defenseman. And, his compete level is high, above average. His puck skills are average, but his skating and hockey sense right now are listed as below average. Now, he skates well for his size, but he has a little trouble getting started, getting those first couple of strides, and doesn't always make quick decisions. One thing that they say Pulkkinen needs to work on is that first pass and the decisions surrounding it. He's ranked as a third pair defenseman, but has the ability, if he can develop well, and this is something the Islanders need to work on, developing the guys they pick, maybe he can move up to the second pair. Now, again, we've heard him described as a unicorn kind of a prospect. So getting those potential skills developed is the difference between a guy who is a third pair or has a chance to play and a guy who can be in the top four defensemen and make a big or bigger impact on the game. After that, after the top four, you start getting into guys who are listed as having a chance to play in the NHL. And, the next guy on the list is Kamil Bednarik, the Islanders' third-round pick this year, a two-way center, solid skater. The question is this. He has some offense, but maybe not enough to consistently produce in the NHL. Again, third or fourth line kind of a guy is the current projection. Whether he can prove some of those scouts wrong with his play in college this year remains to be seen. Then you get to guys who are kind of, not ranked very highly as far as their NHL potential. Guys who are just possibly going to play some games. William Dufour fitting into that ranking. Callie Odelius, an excellent skater who could be intriguing as a prospect, but is, not ranked as more than a guy who could fill in the NHL by the Athletic. Isaiah George, excellent skating defenseman, but not overly skilled and with average size. Now, could he put on, some pounds and change that? Possibly. We'll see, whether or not he does that. He's already 6'1", 196 pounds. Again, you got to understand these rankings tend to be conservative, and you got to realize that for every player you draft, most of them do not realize their ultimate potential and play in the NHL. If you get 2 or 3 full-time NHL players from your draft, you did well out of 7 or 8 players, 6, 7, 8 players that you end up drafting. So that just gives you a little taste of, where the Islanders are ranked right now. Other guys who were in the have a chance to play, Quinn Finley, Dmitry Gamzin, Isaiah George, Alex Jeffries, Tristan Lennox, Eetu Liukas, Jesse Nurmi, and as I mentioned, Callie Odelius. Again, the good news is that the prospect pool went up 5 to 7 spots over a year ago. The bad news is that, well, it's still in the bottom quarter of the NHL, and hopefully it improves or continues to improve. At some point, when you're in the muddy middle, you've got to say, our team has maxed out its potential with this group, and we need to rebuild. When and if Lou Lamoriello will see that and do that remains to be seen. His inclination is to try to go for it every year. I just hope that doesn't create a situation where the bottom falls out and you end up with 3, 4, 5 years of really bad rebuilding hockey. It'll take some shrewd moves to change the core of the team, or at least enough of the players on this team who are aging out. We'll see whether Lou or his successors are able to do that. We have got more to get to on today's show. Some interesting comments from Neil Smith. Plus, Anthony Duclair. We know what his number is going to be with the Islanders. That and our Islanders birthday of the day still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the show description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Neil Smith making some comments. Smith, of course, the GM of the Rangers Stanley Cup winning team back in 1994. Before that, he was actually a scout with the Islanders and was briefly the GM of the Islanders for about 40 days back in 2006 before parting ways with Charles Wang and the team. And on his broadcast, basically he was critical of the Islanders. He has the NHL Wraparound podcast, which he co-hosts. They did a Metropolitan Division preview, and here's what Neil Smith had to say. I don't see this team having improved at all. I don't think they've moved. I think they're stuck in park, to be honest with you. And he talked a little bit about Anthony Duclair, saying Duclair was able to get Lou to give him a 4-year deal, which I was stunned at because, as you said at the open of the Islanders segment here, Duclair is on his 9th team in 11 years. Well, you know what? There's something going on if every time you go to a team, they don't re-sign you, they move you on to the next team. I don't know what it is. I don't know the young man, but there's something going on. And he's taking more of a wait-and-see attitude about Duclair and, basically saying that the Islanders are kind of in the same boat. That the good news is, Neil Smith added, that the division is not very good, and the Islanders could still qualify for the playoffs. They are, again, in that muddy middle, and that's what, Neil Smith basically had to say about that. Now, whether or not Neil Smith is a little resentful of the Islanders because of the way things went in 2006, I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I think he has a point, although I think he's exaggerating that point a little bit when it comes to saying the Islanders haven't improved. I don't think that's the case. I think Duclair and Siplakov have improved the Islanders. The question is how much, and whether or not other teams in the conference, whether it's Pittsburgh or Washington or certainly the Devils, Ottawa adding Linus Ullmark, whether or not some of these teams got, improved more than the Islanders did, that's a different question. So, the Islanders, in my mind, are still roughly somewhere between 7th and 10th in the conference, which means they're either going to barely make or barely miss the playoffs again. And I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping that, Siplakov plays well. The return to health of, guys like Scott Mayfield will help. The return to form of Ilya Sorokin will help. All of these things are possibilities, but that was Neil Smith's take. And yeah, I would say he knows a little something about hockey. Meanwhile, Anthony Duclair, well, he announced what his number is going to be. And, last year he wore a different number. And, not a number that the Islanders tend to, he wore 10. Not going to get 10 on the Islanders. He's worn 91 in the past, not getting that on the Islanders because it's retired for Butch Goring. So, can't have 10, can't have 91. He goes with 11. And I think that's a, solid number. Can't say it's been extremely distinguished. Zach Parise was the last Islander to wear it, and he wore it with a fair amount of distinction. Some other Islanders who wore 11, Dave Hudson, Billy McMillan, Wayne Merrick, who was on all 4 Stanley Cup winning teams, Darius Kasparaitis, Randy Wood, Jason Krog, Bill McCult, Matthias Wienhandel, Nate Thompson, Brian Walston, Lubomir Vishnevsky, Shane Prince, Tanner Fritz, and Austin Zarnik. So that is the number for Anthony Duclair going forward. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. I think most of you probably guessed this one if you're old enough to remember this player. But, today is the 55th birthday of former Islanders center Pierre Turgeon. First overall pick in the 1987 draft by the Buffalo Sabres. Had a 40-goal, 106-point season for Buffalo in 1989-90. Traded to the Islanders in the Pat LaFontaine deal in 91-92, very early in the season. And had an amazing season in 1992-93 for the New York Islanders. 58 goals, 132 points in 83 games that year. Add 13 points in 11 playoff games, 6 goals, 7 assists. And that includes, missing time after he was brutally attacked by Dale Hunter in that playoff run. He came back, but wasn't quite as effective. But one of the best offensive players in Islanders history, and certainly among the best, if not the best, post-dynasty era. That one season in particular, just off the charts outstanding. Also had a 94-point season in 1993-94. Left the Islanders midway through the 94-95 season, played for his hometown Canadiens, the Blues, the Stars, the Avalanche. Ended his NHL career after the 06-07 season. 515 NHL goals, 1,327 points in 1,294 games. Had 97 points in 109 playoff games. And you've got Pierre Turgeon, one of his better games as an Islander. January 16th, 1993, Islanders visiting the Devils at the old Brendan Byrne Arena, and Pierre Turgeon opening the scoring. 6.5 minutes into the game, Mark Fitzpatrick, the only assist. It's 1-0 Islanders. After Claude Lemieux ties it for the Devils, the Islanders go on the power play early in the second period, and Pierre Turgeon scores from Derek King and Tom Kerbers, 2-1 Islanders. Then, in the third period, Turgeon completes the hat trick, makes it 5-1 Islanders. Uwe Krupp and Darius Kasparaitis with the assist. In this game, Pierre Turgeon with the hat trick. He was a +2. He scored on all 3 shots he took. One of his goals came on the power play. And Turgeon, just an electrifying player for the New York Islanders. Islanders beating the Devils 5-3. Mark Fitzpatrick, 24 saves. Chris Terreri was, by the way, the goalie for the Devils, and he obviously finished his career or later played briefly for the New York Islanders. So happy birthday to Hall of Famer Pierre Turgeon. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. I want to thank everybody who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're back Friday to talk a little more Islanders hockey with you. We'll have an update, hopefully, on Matt Martin's situation, and we will have more of the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings as we get closer to Labor Day, September, and the opening of training camp. It is coming so soon. I can taste it, and I can't wait. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.